Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of From the Ground Up, where we take you through the steps to build your faith one step at a time. Today, we are joined by my colleagues, Dr. Valerie and Dr. Shelly, and they are full-time professors at GCU. And we're going to look at the topic of origins, the origin theories in the Christian worldview, and the attributes of God. So I just want to say welcome to Dr. Valerie and Dr. Shelly. It is a pleasure to have you here today. I have a few questions for you today. And the first question I wanted to ask is, why is it important to take time to consider your beliefs regarding science and religion? And I'll start the question with Dr. Shelly this time.
I think one of the why it's important is a lot of times people look at science as a belief system when it's actually a system of study that helps us to understand the world around us and what we believe. And so it's important to understand that difference and how you can't refute science, but also science isn't necessarily a foundational to build on. It's an ever evolving thing as we learn more about the world and so forth. And so it is a place of study more than a place of belief. Do you know what I mean? Too often we forget that it is a way to study things, and we think of it, where people say, that's where people think that Christianity and science can't coexist because they think that they're two separate areas of belief, when actually science is an area of study that Christianity can inform, and vice versa, science can inform Christianity. So it's important to know and understand what they actually are. Does that make sense?
Yeah, excellent point. So I think that does make sense. So, Dr. V, in response, I think what my next question would be, can science, because a lot of times people think science can be used to prove everything. Is there any suggestions that you might give? Anything? What do you think? Can science be used to prove everything? And how does faith inform our decisions with science?
This is a loaded question, and this is addressed in the 7-week topic of origins, of course, but briefly, science does not answer everything. It gives us a lot of answers to a lot of things. In this modern world, it has become a substitute for all things truthful, but that is not always so. In my courses, I challenge students to consider that science does not move into the realm of ethics and morals. There's a whole different world that people often term spiritual and spirituality that has nothing to do with religion at times. And I challenge people to understand what goes on in the mind, even with neuroscience that explains a lot of those developments and how all the neurotransmitters run and work. There is still not an answer for everything. And then that leaves us to wonder who does have those answers, who can provide those answers for us.
Yeah, and Dr. Shelley, for somebody who on the opposite end might lean toward religious beliefs, can you help us understand what that connection between science and faith might be?
I think going along with what Dr. Valerie said is that science can help us to understand the working of the human body, the working of the human mind, the working of the world around us. And in a lot of ways, that can actually encourage us to recognize that there has to be someone or something greater at work. And so it can actually inspire us to seek after the Lord. In my Christian Worldview class, and I'm probably in many others, I share a great testimony of a scientist, an atheist scientist, who came to faith because of science. Does that kind of answer the question? And that it actually informs us.
Yeah, there's stories of people who were atheists and scientists, and they actually became Christians because of the evidence they found through the scientific process. Is that what I hear you saying?
Yep, absolutely. And that happens more often than is reported, I think, or more often than is discovered. We see a lot of that happening.
Well, in thinking about science and faith, why would it be important to understand the various theories of creation that are supported by science? Dr. V, can you help us understand that?
Yes, I have to borrow a term that I heard way back when I lived in California on a radio show where they always had a radio spot on the intersection of faith and reason. And I'll substitute science here for reason, but they're in the same realm. And there is nothing wrong with understanding the world around us. We have the Bible that only gives us so much information about a certain problem in the world. It is not a science book. It was written pre-science, I should say. So it is important to look around us and see what's what, see who did what, see what's going on. And from a Christian perspective, we can absolutely look at and understand where a creator and how creation develops because of that. So it's important to look at these questions of faith and science and see how they work together, even though we may not have all the answers we would like at this time.
Yeah, that's excellent. And that kind of goes into the idea of the attributes of God, maybe not always understanding who God is when we talk about science, but why might it be important to actually start seeking out understanding who God is and the nature of God and his characteristics? What do you think, Dr. Shelley?
Well, as you were saying that, I was thinking of the vast limitlessness of God, and how we're on a journey of discovering and learning more about Him that will take lifetimes and maybe ages, world without end. Um, but recognizing that God has attributes that are all encompassing, like His omnipotence and uh, His omnipresence and so forth. Those are, there's no one like God in those senses. Also, he's a God of love, and he's a God of grace. He's a God of mercy. When we look at the biblical narratives about God, one of the things that can stand out is the many names that God gives himself, like Jehovah Jireh, God our provider, Jehovah Shalom, God our peace. And so understanding that God's nature, and in actuality, understanding that we were created in the nature of God, except for those God only attributes of omnipotence and omnipresence and omnipotence. We have God is love, and we should be loving, so forth. God is a jealous God, and sometimes, and He is jealous for us. And in the brokenness of the world, we become jealous about other things. But recognizing that those qualities have a redemptive presence in God is important. So understanding the creation, understanding God, and desiring to seek after God will really help us to understand ourselves and understand our best selves and what God had in mind for us when He created us.
Dr. V?
I asked the question in my own topic 2 course, or topic 2 origins topic. I ask, why is the spiritual realm so hard to believe? And I really welcome the answers from atheist students who are having trouble with faith, students who have a lot of faith, and they give me wonderful answers, and it leads to a lot of discussion. But trying to understand the attributes of God has everything to do with understanding who you really are and what it is you're supposed to do, which is kind of the end result of the course when you talk about purpose. And understanding the attributes of God works and ties in with understanding that you are someone special and that God is a creator that has created us with incredible gifts, talents, wisdom. It all connects together. So the attributes of God, that God is consistent, that God is truthful, that God is on our side, and also uh, challenging all of the bad things that people think about God, that God is mean, God is nothing but judgmental, nothing but cruel, and one who causes terrible things. Is important to understand when we speak of the attributes of God, because there's a lot of good that God is.
Our next episode, we're going to be talking about that exactly, the suffering and the goodness of God, and what is the original sin, what is free will, and all those things. So I'm looking forward to our conversations next week. So audience and friends, join us next week when we look at the original sin, free will, the purpose of suffering, and click like or subscribe if you want more content like this.